Coming up on Bridge City News, as a new pop-up injection site switches locations, residents follow them to protest. A forensic psychiatry center in Calgary has determined that a Lethbridge woman who set a fire near downtown business is fit to stand trial. And after surviving 9/11, one man has rewritten his path in life. He now advocates for human trafficking victims.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Thank you for joining us. On Saturday night, a group of concerned Lethbridge residents protested the newly set up unsanctioned injection site, which moved locations from Galt Gardens to the Civic Centre field due to anticipated backlash, as well as city bylaw prohibiting tents going up in parks without a permit. Tensions were high and police were present on site. Although there have been calls to shut down the site, the Lethbridge Overdose Prevention Society plans to continue setting up their tent. A forensic psychiatry center in Calgary has determined that a Lethbridge woman who set a fire near downtown business is fit to stand trial. The assessment determined that Mary Lee Parks can be held criminally responsible and is able to provide instructions to her lawyer. The matter has been adjourned to tomorrow to allow the defense time to receive and review the assessment. Parks is accused of starting a fire May 13th near the Umami shop on 4th Avenue South. When first responders arrived, they found wood pallets and cardboard piled up against the building in flames. Firefighters put out the fire, but not before the building and store received more than $6,000 in damage. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will grant approval to a $22 billion freight rail project connecting Alaska and Alberta. The president tweeted Friday that based on the recommendations of Alaska Senator Dan Sullivan and Congressman Don Young, he will be issuing a presidential permit approving the A2A rail project. It is expected to generate more than 18,000 new jobs for Canadian workers and would be very beneficial for Alberta, transporting our province's oil to new markets. Many young people have dreams of moving to North America and making it big, as in big bucks. That was the goal of Sujo John as well, until he and his then pregnant wife were caught in the horror of the September 2001 terrorist attacks.
My life journey actually started in India. I grew up in India, moved to America in February of 2001. And I came to America to chase adventure and prosperity. And of all the places that I started working, that I found work, was actually the World Trade Center. I started working on the 81st floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. My wife finds work on the 71st floor of the South Tower of the World Trade Center.
A lot of media took interest in John's story, and that became the gateway to his new calling. He spent 19 years traveling the world with his story.
As I would travel, it would expose me a lot to the needs around the world. And in one of those trips going back to India, somebody had mentioned to me that I should come and see the red light district. And for those watching me, you know this already. When you're supposed to do something, you're going to see it everywhere. You're going to hear about it. Someone's going to talk about it. You're going to turn the television. And that was going on with me in that season of my life. I was hearing about modern slavery. I was hearing of human trafficking. It was all new, a new topic to me. And so I decided to go into the red light district with a team that I'd taken with me from Dallas, Texas.
John walked into the red light district, a street called GB Road in New Delhi, where 37,000 sex workers live and work.
So when I get out of the car and I see stuff that I'd never seen before, that was my moment of God speaking to me saying, this is where I want you to be working and bring freedom to the captives.
Mayor Chris Spearman shared with the media recently his main concerns about a consolidated 911 dispatch service. He says that the bottom line is to ensure EMS services in Lethbridge are available and response times aren't affected. He also provided specific examples of how response times could be longer with the centralized system.
Recently, there was an incident at Henderson Lake Park where someone collapsed. They were unconscious. And the people called 911. And the answer, when it was answered, they said, "Where are you?" They said, "Henderson Lake Park." And they said, "What city's that?" And then when they said Lethbridge, they said, well, what's the physical address? They said Gunnery Point. And they said, what's the physical address? What's the number? What's the street number? So those types of responses delay. There was a second incident involved where someone at the Legion was involved. And again, it went to centralized dispatch, and the response was, we said, where are you? At the Legion. And he said, what's the physical address? And you can see that in Lethbridge, if it's handled by EMS dispatch in Lethbridge, the folks in Lethbridge know.
Keeping up with our mental health is something we don't do enough of, and due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this has made it even harder. As Micah Quinn explains, a new gym in Lethbridge is pushing the idea of mental health through working out in a unique way.
With COVID-19 still playing a huge factor in how we live our lives, more gyms are finally opening up with a focus on getting body and mind back to normal. F45 Training in South Lethbridge opened its doors on September 19th with that goal in mind.
F45 means functional training in 45 minutes. So all the exercises you do are going to be compound-based movements with resistance or body weight. And so it helps you go throughout your daily life. It helps improve strength, mobility, and coordination, things like that.
The gym focuses on training sessions.
If you're a brand new beginner, that's great. We have those 2 personal trainers that are always there to help you. You know, if you need a modification, if you have an injury, they're there to help you. And on the same token, if you're an expert and you want a really killer workout, those trainers are really good at motivating you. You know, they get down on your level. They're going to push you till that very last buzzer so that you get the most out of your workout. It's 45 minutes. Come in, sweat it out.
The head trainer of the gym, Callie Adamson, says that exercise has a large influence on people's mental health.
It can help you forget about the rest of the day. You come in here for 45 minutes, work out, you can forget about all the other stressors going on in your life, which I know there are a lot. And then also with sedentary behavior, it's really bad for you just to be sitting in your desk all day, whether you're a student or working from home.
Megas says that mask wearing is required in and out of the office, and trainers will also be wearing a mask when they help you.
As soon as she's done that demo, she's putting that mask back on, grabbing some sanitizer so that she can still come and help you and motivate you if that 6 feet of space and social distancing isn't available.
Class sizes for the gym will be spaced down to 12 people to keep a distance of 6 feet for COVID-19 guidelines. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Recapping one of our top news stories, on Saturday night, a group of concerned Lethbridge residents protested the newly set up unsanctioned injection site, which moved locations from Galt Gardens to the Civic Center field due to anticipated backlash, as well as a city bylaw prohibiting tents going up in parks with a permit. Tensions were high and police were present on site. Although there have been calls to shut down the site, the Lethbridge Overdose Prevention Society plans to continue setting up their tent. And a look at weekend weather. We're still getting a bit of a cool southwest wind in the forecast. Overnight should be clear with a low of 6, and for Monday, expect mainly sunny skies with a high of 24. The Western Separatist Party, Wexit, now has a new name as well as a new interim leader. Coming up, BCN's Hal Roberts interviews Jay Hill, the leader of the Maverick Party, who discusses why the Western Canadian provinces need to separate.
In the last federal election, where Prime Minister Justin Trudeau won with a minority government, there was and still is talk about how the Western provinces felt alienated. The feeling has given rise to the new federal party called Maverick Party, formerly known as Wexit Canada. It's a Canadian federal political party. It advocates for the secession of Western Canada, including Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. And joining me now is the interim leader and former Conservative House leader, Jay Hill. Welcome to BCN, Jay.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Hal.
Now, Jay, you retired from politics 10 years ago, a decade ago. Why jump back into the fire now?
Well, as I said when I was interviewed shortly after I've taken this step back the end of June, so 3 months ago, it really is because of my grandchildren. I'm fortunate to have 3 grandchildren now, and increasingly I'm concerned about the future that is going to be facing them very shortly.
So tell our little viewers about Jay Hill, outside of the fact that you were the former leader of the House of Commons, a former Minister of State. You're also what, a farmer, right?
I was, yes. I farmed for 19 years prior to getting into federal politics with my father and one brother. Ultimately, we took over the farm from my father, and then I sold my half of the farm to my brother after it was clear I was going to be in politics for quite some time. I still go up to Fort St. John up in the BC Peace region and help my brother in the spring and fall, keep my hand in, as it were, with agriculture.
So Jay, why do you believe there's such a need for the Maverick Party? What are some of the frustrations you're hearing from Western Canadians?
Well, it's not only the frustrations and concerns that I hear, Hal, but it's based upon my 17 years as a member of Parliament, trying my best to represent the constituents of northeastern British Columbia. It became clear over the years that no matter how strong a voice and how big a contingent of a caucus that Conservatives elected, regardless of the banner. Originally, I was with the Reform Party. I was elected a couple times with Canadian Alliance, and then the last couple times as a Conservative. And that's when I served in cabinet with Prime Minister Stephen Harper. So it was very clear to me, or became clear, that no matter who we sent or how many we sent, the West sent to Ottawa, any party that wanted to gain office as the government of Canada and remain in office had to appease those voters in central Canada, because that's where the most seats are. And so that's a huge challenge for any leader, including Aaron O'Toole now, to not fall prey to that, because if he wants to win, he has to ensure that his message is something that will resonate with Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, and parts of Quebec.
Now, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has already gone on record saying he's not interested in talking about separation whatsoever. How do you respond to that?
Well, I say that's unfortunate. I mean, I have been preceded by many, many very influential and intelligent and educated people, from Ted Byfield, who was a fellow journalist of yours years gone by, to Ted Morton. So I guess two Teds. Who both advocated, along with countless others, that if we're ever going to be taken seriously, if our historical and current grievances are ever to be addressed properly by Central Canada, they have to face the stark reality that if they don't address them, we will leave. And the minute you take potential, and I emphasize potential, separation off of the table, then they don't think we're serious and they don't properly address our grievances. So when Jason Kenney says that, although I'm sure he's speaking for the majority of Westerners that don't want to leave Canada, that's the reality. When he says that, when he takes any potential for independence off the table, he dramatically weakens our argument.
Jay, in the last federal election, the Liberals were shut out of Alberta and Saskatchewan. Why do you think that was?
Well, clearly the majority of people in both provinces, Hal, are conservative-minded. They believe in free enterprise. They believe in smaller, not larger government. They believe in the power of the individual to create his or her own future. And when you see that independent streak, that's why we have a growing number of frustrated Westerners, especially in Alberta and Saskatchewan, that are saying, wait a minute, we can keep electing Conservatives and sending them to Ottawa till the cows come home. It's not going to change the fundamental way our country is structured or are going to get us constitutional reform.
Jay, Manitoba may jump on board secession, but I'm not so sure about British Columbia. I mean, that's a province that's quite divided. There still appears to be a lot of Liberal support there, especially in the lower mainland of the island. The Okanagan seems more conservative. But how will you get the entire province on board?
Well, I don't think we need to, Hal. Clearly, one of the lessons that we learned thanks to the First Nations in Quebec was during the Quebec referendum in 1995, we found that if the country is divisible, and it is, with the properly asked question on independence or separation, then also provinces are divisible. And so what I would say in addressing that question of yours is that British Columbia would be in a very unique situation if Vancouver, the lower mainland, and Vancouver Island, where the vast majority of the population for the province is, voted overwhelmingly against independence, but the rest of the province east and north of Hope, British Columbia, at the front end of the Fraser Canyon, all voted for it. You know, you could rapidly see that there would be a tough choice there to make. If the remainder, the 2/3 of the province that really has the natural resource wealth and revenue that feeds a lot of Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, if they opted to go with Alberta and Saskatchewan, what would the remainder do when they were physically cut off from the rest of Canada, similar to what Alaska is cut off from the United States, the lower 48? I mean, not an impossible situation with Alaska as the example, but it would still be a tough choice for British Columbia to make, I think.
Well, you know, a lot of Alberta politicians I've spoken with, Jay, they say, if we're going to take a part of BC, we need, you know, somewhere where we can get our product to Tidewater. So we may go through northern BC or whatever the case is, but we need some help in that regard. How do you see the current policies of the Conservative Party of Canada? Are they more red Tory policies?
Well, unfortunately, what we've seen just in the last couple of weeks from Aaron O'Toole is once again, he is shifting his policies from what he was saying during the leadership race in order to try to appease Quebecers and people in central Canada. He has recently stated that he's ready to expand the definition of Quebec as a nation within a nation. What does that mean? He doesn't really say. He has said that he is prepared for a conservative government led by him to adhere to the Paris climate change targets, even though in the West, especially, we are vehemently opposed to a carbon tax. So on one hand, he's saying to Westerners, he's going to repeal Trudeau's carbon tax. But on the other hand, he said he's going to meet the targets of Paris climate accord. He can't do that. Everybody understands he can't do that. So once again, we have a federal politician, this one leading the Conservative Party, that is saying basically two things, different, one in the West and one to try to appease Central Canadians. Therein lies the problem, Hal.
Jay, let me ask you something. Aaron O'Toole also went on record after he spoke with Quebec Premier Francois Legault, and he said basically Energy East is off the table. Kenny says, you know, it was off the table back in 2017. What would you and the Maverick Party do to ensure that we get a pipeline from west to the east coast of Canada so Eastern Canadians can buy Alberta oil?
Well, first of all, we're not going to be in government because we're not running in central Canada, so we don't have to try to appease voters down there. So those types of decisions of how to try to manage what is largely an unmanageable country in many respects will not be on our shoulders. Our members of parliament, once elected, will be similar to what the Bloc Québécois does, Hal. They will vote and voice the concerns in the best interests of the West, the same as the Bloc does for Quebec. So we will be that squeaky wheel that is constantly raising the issues of Western Canada. As far as pipelines, I have said for a long time, if we were independent, we would actually have more options than we currently have. We would have the resources if we weren't sending $20 billion a year to central Canada. We would have the resources to look at building a pipeline to Churchill, Manitoba, for example. We would be then a foreign country. Why wouldn't we be on an even playing field with Saudi Arabia, shipping our oil around through the Hudson's Bay, down the East Coast to New Brunswick? You know, the Saudis do it, and people in central Canada don't seem to have any problem supporting one of our international competitors. Why couldn't we do it? And likewise, there's also an option of going north and then west through the Yukon and tying into the American pipeline network coming down from the North Slope that is underutilized now because of diminishing reserves up on the North Slope of Alaska. And we could ship it out of Valdez, Alaska. So lots of options that the new country of Western Canada would have.
Jay, what would that look like with all of the Western provinces forming its own country? Would we have our own currency, our own police force? How would that look to you?
Well, as I've been saying, Hal, we're in the very infancy of creating this party and trying to take it step by step. We're going to have literally tens of thousands of activists in Western Canada demanding change. Hopefully a lot of them supporting the Maverick Party. But the reality is that we'll have to all work together to look at different options. As we move forward, our party, for example, for the part that we will play, we will want to have a solid, credible founding convention that includes a policy discussion on many of the issues, a couple of which you've just raised, very important issues about how independent we will be from the remainder of country, of Canada. All of that would have to be negotiated, obviously, and that would be up to our members to set that policy as it should be.
Jay, do you think it's really wise, though, splitting the right vote, the Conservative vote? I mean, we've got Maxime Bernier's party, the People's Party of Canada, the Maverick Party, the Conservative Party of Canada. Maybe that'll give Justin Trudeau a leg up in the next election.
No, I don't think it will. And I've addressed that with some of my videos that are on our Facebook page, Hal. In fact, if you look at the fear campaign that'll be largely coming from the Conservatives on that issue of vote splitting, the vote splitting that occurred that gave Jean Chrétien 3 back-to-back majority governments, liberal majority governments, back in the 90s. And I'm very familiar because I was there for all 3 of them in the House of Commons. Were largely because Reform split the vote, the Conservative vote, with the Progressive Conservatives in Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. That's where it largely happened. In the West, as you well know, the Conservative vote is consolidated and it's massive. 49 of the 104 ridings in Western Canada a year ago elected Conservative members of Parliament by huge margins. If we run in those ridings, and there's no decision yet as to how many ridings we will be able to run in because of our infancy, because of COVID, because of all of the challenges facing a new party. But if we ran even in all 49 of those, it would be virtually impossible to elect anyone other than either a Conservative or a Maverick. So the choice will be clear to constituents in those ridings, largely in rural Alberta, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia, to either elect a Conservative, mostly they're Conservative incumbents, or a Maverick candidate.
So Jay, at the end of the day, what's the ultimate goal for the Maverick Party? Is the goal similar to the Bloc Québécois, which only stands for the interests of Quebec? So you're just going to be looking at the interests of BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba?
That's correct. Obviously, we will also support where it's in the best interest of all of Canada, where it doesn't discriminate against the West. So bills like C-48, the anti-tanker bill, Bill C-69, gun legislation that indiscriminately attacks law-abiding, legitimate gun owners, many of which are in the West. Obviously, those types of legislation will be fought viciously by Maverick members of Parliament as we stand up for the West. If there's legislation or a budget, for example, with a Conservative government that's putting forward positions and legislation that's good for all of the country, but also good for the West, of course, we will work with the Conservatives and vote for it.
Now, if we have an early election, Jay, are you confident you'll have enough MPs to run?
I'm not. Obviously, if we have an unnecessary election this fall on the throne speech or an upcoming budget at some point this fall, we will do the best we can. That's our commitment to our members. And we will try to ensure we have credible, quality candidates running. So we're not interested in running in all 104 ridings just to have a name on the ballot. We would be more interested in having a few dozen of very quality candidates that can carry our message through the campaign.
So Jay, any chance that they'll remove the interim tag, from leader for the Maverick Party for yourself? Do you want to stay on long term?
No, not at all. I put 17 years into this. As I said at the outset of our interview, Hal, I stepped forward because of my grandchildren. A lot of people can relate to that. I was quite comfortable in my retirement. But I really came to the realization, as so many Westerners have, that I could sit back comfortably. What's happening to Canada is not going to dramatically affect the remainder of my life, however long that is. But I didn't want to be on my deathbed looking into the eyes of my grandchildren and think I could have tried to do something and didn't. And that's really what's motivating me and so many others.
Jay Hill, interim leader for the Maverick Party. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Do you need some health advice? Well, today's guest regularly sees patients who struggle with many different health conditions. Dr. Clayton Cogano, a naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Well Vitality Health Clinic. He also has training in conventional medicine with a Bachelor of Science in Exercise Science, Kinesiology, and 3 years of research on radiation and cancer at the University of Lethbridge. Dr. Cogano, welcome back to BCN.
Thank you for having me again.
Now, first of all, talk about your approach to finding solutions for the health struggles so many of us face on a daily basis.
Well, I guess in my office, I see a lot of different various things. You always want to try and get to the root cause of the problem when they come in, because a lot of patients that I see have been unable to figure out what's wrong with them. And so the very first thing that I want to do is sit down with them take a long time to go through all of their health history, all their medical history, all their labs. And you want to kind of sort through all of that and then figure out from there a plan moving forward. A lot of time it's history taking, and then further to that, further lab testing, either more in-depth lab testing or even just your general lab testing that just wasn't done. Often you can figure it out.
Now, you've said that in your daily practice, you sometimes come across chronic fatigue with a lot of your patients now. How common is chronic fatigue in today's society, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Honestly, people put too much on their plates. People are very busy. That's one of the main reasons for chronic fatigue. There's a lot of other reasons, but it is extremely common in my practice. Yeah.
What are some of the causes of chronic fatigue? Like you said, being very busy, not getting enough rest, perhaps?
Yeah, and it kind of compiles onto other things. When stress is elevated, often people aren't sleeping well. Sometimes people can have other issues like perhaps low B12, blood sugar irregularities, low iron. So it's important to, in my opinion, even thyroid issues. And sometimes thyroid issues can get missed. So it's important to test things and test things in depth. And look at the complete history of what's going on and what's been going on in order to figure it out.
So what are some of the effective treatments outside of B12 and maybe cutting some of the stress out of our lives?
Well, it completely varies. Like a lot of times, if someone's having trouble sleeping, you have to try and start figuring out why they can't sleep. If someone has, for example, a lot of stress, you can't just tell them to quit work if work is their big stressor. You have to try and figure out ways to work around it, against the grain sometimes. So the first thing is to figure out what's wrong. For example, if it was a cortisol issue, which tends to be the case with a lot of patients with chronic stress leading to chronic fatigue, a lot of times you will want to treat that with different vitamins and herbs. And then as that improves, you want to double check that you're not missing anything. Like perhaps that person also has low iron or their thyroid isn't working properly. You have to treat the whole person in order to fix chronic fatigue. Otherwise, you'll get a patient that gets about 50% better and then plateaus.
You know, other people I've spoken to as well in the healthcare professionals saying, focusing on God's word and meditating and breathing that helps a lot as well. How about certain foods when it comes to stress? Are there certain foods as well that you can eat that can really help?
Lifestyle change is massive. It is massive. It is also probably one of the most difficult things for me to help someone with. You can tell people all day long to do something here and do something there, but ultimately that's the hardest thing for me because it's up to them when they go home to do it. In terms of foods, yes, absolutely. Eating a healthful diet, eating a whole food diet, even looking into food sensitivities, that can create a ton of fatigue in people if they're battling the food that they're eating all the time. So it's important, again, to look into things and take a complete history, because what I find actually is clinically, people that are coming in, they're coming in with bags of supplements and they're still tired. And it's not a supplement deficiency in people. It's a multitude of system failures that's causing it, and you have to figure it out.
Dr. Cogano, many people also go through bouts of insomnia. They just can't get any sleep. What do you think causes that? Is it a big part of it is not putting your phone down when you go to bed at night?
Again, yeah, a lot of lifestyle changes. Yes, there absolutely is. A lot of people don't prepare for bed. They have their TV in their bed, they're on their phone. It's a social area now versus an area just for sleep. And so that is a huge thing. There's other reasons as well for insomnia, and insomnia it can be a tricky thing. Sometimes breathing issues like sleep apnea can create patients that just don't get a restful sleep or not at all. Anxiety is a huge thing, and that goes hand in hand with chronic fatigue, and chronic stress in general leads to a lot of anxiety, in which we can help a lot with. And then there's other things like, for example, different neurological issues with the brain. Now, unfortunately, we can't test those. So that would be like, for example, a slight deficiency of melatonin or a slight deficiency of GABA, which is a neurotransmitter in your brain that stops the busy signal. But we don't know if it's one or the other or something else. And so in those cases, we have to guess with different herbs, different vitamins to try and fix it. Often you can, but it takes a couple tries for sure.
You know, I remember years ago, my doctor told me, yeah, the herbs and the vitamins are good, but also at the same time, some warm milk. Is that still applied today, or maybe reading a book to help somebody fall asleep if you suffer from insomnia?
Oh yeah, well, I think the warm milk thing is more calming, right? I think. I don't know about that one, but I know that certain herbs like, chamomile tea is really calming. Rosemary is very calming. Passion flower root specifically, you can drink it as a tea, you can take it as a supplement. It just makes you calm. It doesn't necessarily put you to sleep, but it helps get your body ready for sleep.
Consider using CBD oil or capsules as a treatment for insomnia?
Yeah, CBD, it's a fairly new thing, especially since the legalization process. A lot of doctors are now delving into more research on it. Some of the research is promising on CBD for quite a lot of things, neurological things especially. So I think in certain cases of, for example, neurological insomnia, where there might be a brain chemical imbalance, something going on, it may prove benefit. And more research, the jury is still kind of out on it. And in some cases, it's been shown to actually make sleep worse. And some people will actually get anxiety on it. And so I think it's a potential option for people, but they definitely should talk to their doctor about it before they just go start taking anything, really. You want to be focused and accurate on what you're taking. That way, you end up just with better results overall.
Let's move on right now and talk about digestive health, Dr. Coggino, and let's talk specifically about the condition called leaky gut. What exactly is leaky gut?
Leaky gut is the general term for something called intestinal permeability, increased intestinal permeability. And what that means is that the enterocytes, or the cells in your small intestine, are slightly inflamed and irritated, and they're allowing larger protein particles of food to get into your bloodstream. And when a big piece of protein gets into your bloodstream, your body's not used to it. It's used to it being broken down to a certain size. So it sees it as foreign, and it starts to kind of attack it, and it can create an inflammatory response called an immunoglobulin response. And that can have widespread systemic effects on the body, meaning you could get anything from rosacea, eczema, psoriasis, acne, to chronic fatigue, to joint pain, to gut pain, to IBS. And so the testing for something like that is, I find, very beneficial to helping people who have a multitude of symptoms, especially those with gut issues like IBS, because irritable bowel syndrome is a diagnosis that doesn't tell anyone what the problem actually is. Most patients come into the office knowing their gut's irritated. So me telling them that they have irritable bowel syndrome does not help anyone. We have to try and figure it out. And one way to figure it out is through a blood test called an IgG blood test that can actually start looking at, maybe what foods is this person sensitive to help them.
So what are some of the effective treatments for leaky gut?
I honestly, the first biggest thing is to try and figure out what foods or what product is irritating their gut. and eliminate it. You have to get rid of the cause of the irritation. Sometimes the cause of the irritation is something more severe, like inflammatory bowel disease, like an autoimmune thing, maybe like celiac or heavy metal exposure, perhaps even antibiotics. So you got to get rid of whatever thing is irritating it first, and then you have to start working to heal the gut. And often I use a combination of L-glutamine and a high dose of omega-3, specifically a component in that called EPA, which is an anti-inflammatory. So you want a nice strong anti-inflammatory in the gut, and then you want glutamine, which helps to heal and bind the gut cells back together.
Now, there are many body cleanses in the market today. What do you think of those which claim to really cleanse your liver?
I think that there's overclaim to what a lot of them can do. I think that some will have benefit, but you also have to be careful. I just saw a patient just the other day that did a liver cleanse and ran into some serious issues because her liver didn't need it. And honestly, she even had some liver issues. I think that liver detoxes, and well, she didn't know, right? And so it ended up being an issue. I think you have to be cautious with it, but I think that the general idea behind it is positive. I think really it's meant to, detoxes, especially in the liver, are meant to improve circulations, maybe give your organs a little bit of a rest, improve toxic elimination, because that's what the liver does. So yes, you can absolutely do that. Provide your body with better nutrients, and even just increasing circulation, and really that's what a detox should be all about, is improving health, not depleting the body of a bunch of things.
We talk about alcohol potentially damaging the liver. How about certain foods that may have the same effect?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of different foods that can damage the liver. Certainly you want to make sure that you're eating a healthful diet and a whole foods diet. And I find that the biggest thing is variety in the diet, because the liver itself is like a giant filter. So the more healthy whole foods, antioxidant foods that you're eating, the better it's going to function.
So a lot of berries, blueberries, raspberries, right? That really helps?
Exactly. The nice thing about the liver is it is one of the only things in your body that can regenerate. So if it's down to a quarter functionality, it will regenerate to 100%. But the biggest catch-22 with that is that often what we see is that people that have a liver capacity that's so low, they're often alcoholics or they're drug addicts, or they have issues that they cannot stop. So it often continues the decline. However, if you start treating your body healthfully, then that is one organ that can regenerate.
When is a good time for a detox? Any symptoms to look for that would signal that you need to do a detox? And I'm not talking about drugs or alcohol specifically here.
Oh, yeah. So in terms of timing, often if I'm going to tell a patient to do a detox, because detoxes can be a little bit depleting, often I say spring or summer. I find a lot of people are already extra fatigued in the winter. There's more disease going around, more influenza. And so you want to make sure that you're more boosting your body up in the winter. I think that spring and summer, you're a little bit more energetic. Your body's a little bit better to handle something like that. So timing wise, that's definitely when you want to be doing them. Yeah.
What are some of the benefits of probiotics? There are different doses of probiotics. Now, do you go for one with the most?
No, you have to be careful with probiotics. It's also sort of an area that we don't fully understand yet in medicine. It's a fairly new thing in medicine, probiotics. We know that they're beneficial and they have lots of health benefits, but the microbiome in our gut is extremely complex. And there's certain times where you don't want to take a probiotic. For example, when I'm doing a gut healing protocol for leaky gut, right? I often now don't give a probiotic with it. And the reason is because sometimes people with gut issues also have other things along with it, perhaps candida, which is yeast or fungal overgrowth, or even something else called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. And if the person has those things and we haven't tested them to rule them out, then a probiotic actually would make those conditions worse, and it would actually make the person feel worse. But by and large and in general, a probiotic for most people is safe, it's effective, it can boost up your immune system, and you don't need a massive quantity. A lower dose of probiotic typically is just fine, and you just want a multi-strain. So often you want to replete it with 11 to 12 billion or 11 to 12 different types of bacteria.
Dr. Clayton Coggino, naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Well Vitality Health Clinic. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much, Al. Take care.
Michael Zwagstra is a public high school teacher and author. He has extensive experience teaching a wide variety of grade levels and currently teaches high school in Manitoba, high school social studies. He has a new book out called The Naked Man Flees, and it's not exactly what you're thinking. Michael joins me now via Skype from Steinbach, Manitoba. Welcome back to BCN, Michael.
Well, thank you very much, Hal. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Now, you've previously written 2 books and articles on education policy. Why now have you decided to write a book about the Bible?
Well, the Bible has obviously been an area of interest of mine for a long time. And while I have written books on education policy, and that's what I'm well known for across the country commenting on, I'm also very passionate about the Bible. I believe that there's a lack of biblical literacy out there, not just among non-Christians, but frankly, even among many Christians, that we get a very superficial understanding where if you're relying just on popularized movies and maybe listening to some sermons and remembering what you learned in Sunday school, you're going to miss a whole lot of valuable information that's in the Bible and things that's worth learning. And so I decided it was time to write a book that pointed out some of these passages that commonly get overlooked and take a look at what they really mean.
Okay, we got to talk about this title, The Naked Man Flees. Makes a few people chuckle here. How did you come up with that name?
Well, the Naked Man Flees is also the title of one of the chapters, and it references a couple of verses in Mark chapter 14, verses 51 and 52. And that's the story of where Jesus has just been arrested by the guards, and he's about to be taken into custody. And it mentions that there was a young man who had been following behind, and the guards seized him, and he ran away, and he left his linen garment behind, and he ran away naked. And it's just this bizarre 2 verses. It appears only in the Gospel of Matthew, nowhere else in the Bible. We never see any direct reference to this man again. And a lot of people just miss that. They just go, well, what's this doing in here? And what I point out in my book is that actually there's a number of things we can learn from it. But one of the key things is, yeah, it's an odd event. It's the type of thing that you wouldn't expect a reference to a naked man running away to make it into a holy, sacred account regarding the arrest of the Son of God. But it is the type of thing you would expect to find in a real historical book describing what actually happened, and that the only reason for Mark to even put this in his gospel is because it happened. It's bizarre, it's strange, and it's yet powerful support for the veracity, for the truthfulness of the reporting that we find in the Gospels.
Michael, why is it that Christians and non-Christians alike tend to overlook certain parts of the Bible when they read it?
Well, there's a number of reasons, but the key thing is that our brains tend to go with what is most familiar. And so we get used to certain patterns, and we tend to look at things based on how we've commonly understood it. And so what that means is that we miss details that don't really fit with what we commonly understand. And the book starts where I show a little triangle, and I ask people, what does it say within it? And most people who read this triangle will think it says Paris in the spring, but it actually doesn't. There's actually an extra word in there, an extra the, that almost everyone misses, because you're so used to seeing the phrase Paris in the spring, we miss that it actually says something a little extra. And it's similar when we look at our Bibles, that we know the story of Abraham and Moses and David, and it's so easy to miss the aspects of their character and their personalities that don't fit the popular narrative. And there's a lot of those things like that. And that's why Christians and non-Christians alike tend to miss these things when they're reading their Bibles.
Now let's talk a bit about Abraham. Your first chapter is titled, Abraham Shoos the Vultures Away. What are you discussing specifically in this chapter here?
Well, in Genesis chapter 15, God at one point is telling Abraham that he is going to inherit the land of Canaan. He's going to be the father of a great nation. And what happens is that Abraham then asks God, how can I know that this will be so? And instead of giving a straightforward answer, we see from verses 7 to 11, God telling Abraham to offer a sacrifice. And he has to bring a heifer, a goat, and a few other sacrificial animals. And then he has to cut them in half. And he then lays them on opposite sides from each other, and he walks in between them. And the passage then says in verse 11 that he shooed the vultures away until the evening. He actually kept the vultures from eating the carcasses. And then after that, we see the dialogue resume between God and Abraham. Now, again, because this is a famous chapter dealing with the great promise that God is giving to Abraham, we tend to gloss over this is a whole day that Abraham spent at this sacrifice. He not only had to bring these animals, he had to cut them in half. Think about the amount of gore and blood involved and how difficult it would have been for this old man to do this. And then he's walking in between them, and then he's keeping the vultures away. It's a powerful story of Abraham showing that his faith was real, that this following God's commands was so important that he was going to follow it exactly as God said. And he also knew, I can't just let the vultures come and eat the sacrifice that I've offered up to God. I have to protect them. And so he spent the day doing that. And it shows that that he followed up his faith with good works. Because, of course, as we know as Christians, good works come about as a result of our faith. And Abraham demonstrated it in that section.
Now, another interesting chapter is called God Almost Kills Moses. Tell me more about that one.
Well, in Exodus chapter 4, most people know the story of Moses encountering God at the burning bush and God telling him, you're going to be leading the Israelites out of Egypt. And Moses is then on his way back to Egypt. And then we know that afterwards that Moses meets Pharaoh and makes the demand. But in between, while he's in the wilderness, there are 3 verses 24 to 26, where it says that on his way back, God met Moses and was going to kill him until his wife Zipporah took a flint knife and circumcised Moses' son right then and there. And as a result of that, God did not kill Moses. And we don't see that incident in the movie The 10 Commandments. You don't see it in Prince of Egypt, and you don't hear about it in a lot of sermons. But again, there's a lesson here. Moses didn't do something that was absolutely fundamental. He didn't circumcise his own son. There were a few things that were more disobedient among Jewish people at that time than to not circumcise their own son. And there was no way that Moses could lead the Israelites out of Egypt if that had been left unresolved. And so it's a reminder to us today that if you've been called into ministry, right, or to lead an organization, make sure you've taken care of the fundamentals first before you just go ahead and take that position. If you're going to be the leader of a pro-family lobby group, you better make sure your marriage is in good shape first. Take care of the fundamentals, just like Moses should have.
You know, it's funny, your book almost reminds me of a Cole's Notes version of the Bible. You know, the analysis and getting a little more in depth with it, and then maybe summarize it a little bit more. Now, your book, The Naked Man Flees, Michael, has 40 chapters, half about the Old Testament, the other half about the New Testament. I thought maybe you'd focus a little more on the New Covenant.
Yeah, I did this deliberately. I chose to, and of course, 40 is the number of completion too, so there's that biblical reference. So it's a complete book. But I chose to go half and half because I want to make it clear that the Old Testament and the New Testament are equally important. Christians, it's tempting to skip the Old Testament and just go straight to the New Testament, and I understand why. The New Testament makes things more explicit and direct, but the Old Testament is where you find the foundations. It's the Old Testament that Paul is speaking about in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16, when he says that all Scripture is inspired by God. And so you can't really fully understand the New Testament if you don't read the Old Testament. And so I wanted to make sure in this book that I gave equal attention to both the Old and New Testament because they're both important for Christians today.
Now, do you believe that the stories you talk about in your book actually happened, or are they simply symbolic of a deeper spiritual meaning?
I believe the stories actually happened. Throughout the book, I take a high view of Scripture. So I believe that the incidents that have happened in regards to Abraham and Moses and all of the others, I believe they occurred as actually described within the Bible. Obviously, we have to read the Bible according to the genre that the different books are written in. I recognize that. But in the historical narrative where it's describing things that happened, whether it was the miracles that Jesus did or the events described in the Old Testament, I believe the appropriate thing to do as Christians is to take the Bible at its word. And so I do believe the stories happened as described.
So what benefit would Christians really receive from reading your book?
Well, I think Christians would hopefully gain a deeper appreciation for the Bible. And it's really easy sometimes to come to the idea that, I've kind of been there, done that. I'm pretty familiar with the Bible already. And we get bored in our Bible reading, in our devotions. And so this book is intended to shake people up a little bit and to make them notice, whoa, there's some parts of the Bible that I might have missed before. And I wonder how many other parts of the Bible I've been missing. Maybe I need to read the Bible a bit more carefully. Maybe I shouldn't just stick to the well-worn, one verse a day devotional guide, which tends to pick the easy verses with the obvious application. Maybe I should get back to reading the Bible itself and not skip over chapters that I think are difficult. And so I really hope that my book inspires people to take more time reading the Bible itself.
Now, you've also done media interviews about your book on secular radio stations. Why would non-Christians be interested in your book?
Yeah, I have done a number of interviews on some pretty major secular radio stations where the majority audience is non-Christian, and each of the hosts that interviewed me was definitely non-Christian. But I believe that non-Christians should read the Bible too, because obviously as a Christian, I want them to read it because I hope it brings them to faith in Jesus. But even before that, just to have a better understanding of our history and our culture, it makes sense to read the Bible and have some understanding of it. And one of the interviews I did was with a radio host who asked me a series of questions about the book. He had actually started his interview saying, "This is going to be interesting because I'm an atheist, and here I am talking about the Bible." And by the end of the interview, he had said, "You've convinced me. I'm going to get a copy of your book. Maybe I need to, as an atheist, start reading the Bible because there's some stuff in there that I need to become more familiar with." And so, if it could be a witness and to get more people to look at the Bible and not just have it sit on their shelves, then that's what I'm hoping happens.
Hey, did you follow up to see if this person gave their life to Christ?
Well, the interview was only last week, and so I don't think that it's going to happen quite that quickly. But I certainly would hope that does happen, and I do hope to be able to talk to him again. I am on that show on a fairly regular basis talking about education issues, and so I do want to look for opportunities to ask the question.
And you know what? At the end of the day, the seed has been planted, so that's wonderful. Now, some would say, "Hey, Michael Swagstra, you're not a pastor. Why should I buy into this?" Do you have any theological training?
You're right. I'm not a pastor, and most of my obviously experience and training in education is in the field of education, including a master's degree in educational administration. But I also have a Master of Arts in Theological Studies from Liberty University, and I completed that degree about 4 years ago. And so I do have some academic training in the area of theology. And obviously I have my personal reading that I've done over the years and teaching. But I do have a master's degree in theological studies, and on a part-time basis, I do teach at Steinbeck Bible College as an adjunct professor, where I've taught courses on history and theology and ethics, and so I do believe I have some reasonable credentials in this area.
Now, where can people actually pick up a copy of your book, Michael?
Well, the simplest way to get it, because it's just out, would be to go to Amazon. If you go to Amazon.ca and you type in "The Naked Man Flees," it'll pop up pretty quickly. Either that or type in my name and it'll come up pretty quickly there. And I do expect to start getting into some bookstores in the not too distant future. But obviously right now, with everything being slowed down by COVID, the fastest way at this point, if you want to get a copy of the book, is just go to Amazon and type in the name of the book, "The Naked Man Flees," and it'll pop up pretty fast.
Could "The Naked Man Flees" be used as a private devotional or maybe in a Sunday school class? I bet you kids would probably get a kick out of that title.
Yeah, I believe it could. And the chapters are short. There's 40 chapters, and each chapter is about 1,200 to 1,500 words, and so it could be used as a devotional. In fact, one of the people I had involved in editing the book turned it into that as he was doing his editing. He said that as he would edit one chapter a day, and he said, I just made it my devotional. And so that's where I sort of thought that, well, I wonder if maybe others could do that too. But it could also be a great book to use in Sunday school, both at the high school level and in an adult class. I think there could be some great discussion from it. I've taught adult Sunday school for many years, and these are the types of topics I can assure you that get people interested in discussions. And Sunday school is a great opportunity to do that. And I think this book could be a good resource for Sunday school classes.
Does your book try to settle long-standing theological scores such as Calvinism, the age of the earth, or infant versus adult baptism?
No, that is not the purpose of the book. I take an approach somewhat similar to C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity approach. I guess in this case, I'd sort of go with mere evangelical Christianity, because it is an explicitly evangelical book. It is in that regard. But I'm very clear in the book that I'm not getting into the mode and the time of baptism as part of the debate, or the proper interpretation of Revelation. Those are important issues, and I think it's worthwhile for Christians to look into them and explore them. And I've got views on all of those, as do most Christians. But that's not the purpose of the book. The purpose of the book is to get people into the Bible and to get them thinking for themselves. And I'm not interested in settling theological scores. This is scores. This is not going to be the book that resolves all those issues.
Teacher and author of the book The Naked Man Flees, Michael Zwijgstra. Thanks for joining me today from Steinbach, Manitoba.
Well, thanks very much, Hal. It's been a pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.